welcome to everyone who's in the room today. We have two of the chairs that were previously as Adults and Health, and my colleague.
I'm Councillor Magdalene Guinness, the Chair of Children and Young People's Panel.
So we're sort of doing co-chairing today. I'm going to go through the order of business and then we're going to start quite swiftly after a few introductions. So I'm just going to go through order of business. So, Philip, can you tell us about recording today and if this is being broadcast, because this is a meeting in common, not our normal scrutiny meeting?
Sure, yeah. So it's a public meeting, so like any other meeting, members of the public can attend. If they wanted to record part of it, they can do. Similarly, I'm also taking a recording for the purposes of writing the minutes. So, yeah.
Any apologies for absence?
Yes, so I've had apologies from Councillor Raporku, Councillor Ursula Gosling and Councillor Lawton's given apologies for lateness.
Any items for urgent business? No. Okay, declarations of interest. I'm a member of the RCN. I don't think anything else is particularly relevant here today. No deputations? No. So there are notes from the previous meeting in common. So they're on pages 1 to 8 in your pack, the first part. These were incredibly helpful because these were all the recommendations and everything that were made at the minutes from the last meeting. So that was held May last year. This is a panel that only meets once a year. Normally we meet earlier in the year, but we got delayed this year, so hence it's a little bit later than normal. So just for the record, if there's anything that anyone wants to bring up as part of these minutes, can they speak now? Otherwise we're going to use it as a record, which will help us in determining what's actually happened this year in the slides that are presented to us in the pack. So I'm going to ask for anything around accuracy or any other issues that people want to raise at this point. Councillor Mason.
Really sorry, but I've got to give huge apologies. I have to leave at 7:30. I've got another appointment. Thank you.
Thank you. Otherwise, I can take the minutes as accurate. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Pippa, can I just say something, please?
Sorry, who's got the hand up?
Me.
Oh, Councillor Peacock. Right, sorry, I can't see you from here. There, now I've spotted you. Councillor Peacock.
Yeah. Well, I'm not at the meeting today because of being living near Beyonce's concert, and so I haven't got any paperwork or anything. I don't know if you can hear me. Yeah, I've got no paperwork, so I can't. If there's anything you can put up on the screen, I'll be obliged for that.
So, Councillor Peacock, you should have. Sorry, this
Nothing.
is all a bit funny. You should have an email with the minutes and the meeting.
I can't look at that and look at your beautiful face.
Fine. The slides will be coming up on the screen, so you should be able to see them there.
Okay.
Okay, excellent. We'll go around and introduce everybody in a moment, but thanks, Councillor Peacock. Right, okay, so before we start this special meeting, as I said, we've done the introductions of the chair, so we're going to go round to Philip, and then if councillors just like to introduce themselves as we go round. Officers, I think it might be worth you introducing yourselves the first time you speak, otherwise there's a fair few. Thank you.
My name is Philip Slaughter, I'm a scrutiny officer.
Councillor Tyan Curran, Labour member for Woodside.
Councillor Mary Mason, member for Bounds Green.
Councillor Brennan, councillor for Muswell Hill.
Sean O'Donovan, councillor for Tottenham Hale.
Amanda Bernard, chair of SEN Power in Haringey Parent Carer Forum.
Councillor Dunstall, councillor for Stroud Green.
Councillor Peacock, do you just want to, I know you've just spoken, but just want to officially.
Yeah. Councillor Sheila Peacock, councillor for South Tottenham.
Apologies, I was just checking to see if I could see any other councillors online at that point. Okay, so Councillor Brabazon?
Zina Brabazon, Cabinet Member for Children, Schools and Families.
In which case, the other Cabinet Member then, please. Councillor De Sneves?
Lucy De Sneves, Cabinet Member for Health, Social Care and Wellbeing.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Right, so as I said, this is a meeting in common today, and it's all to do with children and young people, well, no, so young people's transition. That's why it crosses both the scrutiny committees, both adults and children's. And we are delighted that so many of you could come and speak with us today. We do note that there's quite a number of you, and there's obviously a number of us. We'll all want to ask questions, and there's quite a lot of information already on the slide pack. So I would ask that whoever's going to be opening up, I thought it might be you, Anne, the proceedings today, if you could literally just give us a brief overview of anything you particularly want to highlight with us. We will then go through the slides and people can ask questions as we go through, because I think if officers speak to the pack, then it's going to take up quite a considerable amount of time, and then by the time we've all asked questions, then I think it's going to become quite a very long meeting, shall we just say. So everyone will have an opportunity to, the officers that are speaking from that slide, at that point, if they'd like to, we will ask questions on it, and if the officers who are relevant to that slide could then come in at that point, that might be easier. Anne?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Connor. You're right, we have come in fourth today because we are really proud of the work that we're doing, and so we have tried to prepare a presentation that officers, if you don't mind, because they put so much work into it, if it's at all possible that they can pull out some points.
How many, sorry, I'm just going to say, are we talking a couple of minutes at the beginning of the meeting, or are we talking a couple of minutes per slide?
So we've prepared an hour to go through the slide deck and then an hour and a half for questions.
Right. I think an hour might be a bit long for us to sit here and try to remember all the questions.
Right.
So I would suggest we definitely break that down into smaller chunks.
That would be perfect.
Okay.
Yes. There's a number of subheadings that will enable us to do that. And I'll say to officers, if we can be succinct, and we have already had these conversations because we know it's quite a lengthy slide deck.
Okay.
But we followed the brief from the last session and thought it's hard to keep information out, and so we thought this would be the best way. Thank you very much for I just know that officers have put hours and hours.
I thought it was, doesn't matter. We'll go with that as a trial. If I find the meeting is literally going on and we've literally haven't asked many questions,
100%.
and we might try to change this around.
Absolutely.
Because I want councillors to have the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
okay, fantastic, Anne. Over to you. Thank you.
So thank you very much. We really are pleased to be here, and we're really pleased to be here for the joint scrutiny. This is work that we together as children and adults do collectively. So Sarah and I, we lead it. It was Beverly Tarker beforehand. And I remember, and I won't take up too much time, where we started this work. We knew that transitions was one of those issues between our services. And so it was budget fortnight about 2 years ago now, where we locked ourselves in a room to see how best we can address the issues. And so we then had a business case that was well supported through the children's SEND inspection and then the adults inspection. And so keeping things short, we're here today. There are many of us, and because there are many aspects to this work and it's incredibly complicated, our focus originally was on getting the money. However, the first driver for all of us on this table is the quality of service delivery and improvement. So we look forward to hearing from you today and from your questions. We do apologise for the length of the slides, but it's hard to address the key issues without having all the information there. So I'm now going to hand over to Dion, who's going to be, we are all going to be succinct, so over to you, Dion.
Good evening. So I'm Dion Thomas, and I'm the Director of Children's Social Care and Safeguarding. And by way of introduction, in terms of transition service, last year saw the development of our new Haringey Integrated Transition Service. And over the course of the last 12 months, we have been making sure that the team has been set up with staff arriving into the team from September last year. So as I arrived in the department in August, the service was getting up and running. And what's been really helpful is that I arrived at the same time pretty much as my colleague Joe Beatty. So we really have been able to take this forward together, sitting underneath and now Sarah. So that's been really helpful in terms of how we can set that collaboration and the close alignment together. The vision is clear. We are working towards having an integrated service delivery model that is supporting vulnerable young people through this important period of transition to adulthood, maximising their opportunities for independence, developing resilience, and enabling them to reach their full potential. You will see through the presentation that we are developing a cross-directorate multi-agency approach, which is for seamless service delivery for these young people, so that we ensure that no young person falls through the gap. You will hear through the presentation the Haringey Integrated Transition Service is working across housing, health, education, employment and community assets, so that we are preparing young people already known to existing teams within children's services and beyond, who present as vulnerable as they transition through to adulthood. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Dennis, who will take us through the first part of the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Dion, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak a little bit about the work that we're doing in the transitions. My name is Dennis Scotland. I'm the head of service for the transitions team, and I have been involved since the discussions began all the way back in 2023, I think it was, when we were looking at the business case and so on. The first slide says, actually that's not the first slide, but just wanted to confirm that the cohort of young people that we're working with. So we're working with children with special education needs and those with disabilities, those with learning difficulties and mental health support needs. Also included in that group are children in care and care leavers. There will be some young adults as well who might be neurodivergent. And then we've got some vulnerable young people who may not meet the eligibility criteria, the threshold for a Care Act assessment, but are nonetheless vulnerable. And in terms of a transitional safeguarding approach, we'll be keeping an eye on those young people as well to make sure that they do not fall through the gap that Dion referred to. So that's the sort of group of young people. We had a quick look at the figures today and we identified, we've got to do some more work around this, but we identified about 107 young people who are 17 years old, and therefore we'll be identifying them to work with them, but ideally transitions starts at a much earlier rate, but 107. Of that 107, maybe even if 50% of those young people are eligible for care and support needs, that's still quite a number to work our way through. So I'll just move to next slide, and if I'm going too slow, please do let me know. The next slide talks about the 6 posts that we recruited to. Dion mentioned the start. We started in April of 2024, but by the time you do all your recruitment and do all your checks and everything, people didn't start to come in till around about September of 2024. The last person joined in February 2025, and so the team is complete now in terms of phase 1, and we'll talk later on about phase 2. So we filled all those posts, and now we've also got some project support, what we call program support, and they are very valuable, invaluable in terms of the support they offer us in terms of pulling together all of the information that we need, because, as you could appreciate, there's a lot of interest in this work, and we're having to give updates in different forums, as you can imagine. Moving forward, just in terms of training, we recruited social workers with a mixture of adults and children's experience. Tried to get that balance right. One or two of the social workers have got transitions experience and so on. So it was useful to do that in terms of knowledge of children's and knowledge of adults, because the systems don't, they're not completely the same. But nonetheless, you would have to provide significant training across various areas like mental capacity assessments and DOLS, deprivation of liberty training as well, so that and mental health training. So quite a bit of training has gone into the team to make sure they're properly equipped and knowledgeable to be able to work with the diverse group of young people that we're working with. We also provided training around preparation for adulthood, and you'll hear later on about the 5 work streams. 4 of them are based on the 4 outcomes for preparation for adulthood, and that work is vital because it starts from age 14. Once you identify that child, what their needs are, then the idea is that we work with those young people from that early age until the point of transition, which is normally around age 18 and onwards. But identifying them early is crucial, and we've been starting to do some of that work. I put a case study. We put a case study in the pack for you, just to give an example of some of the different types of young people that we've been working with. And this young person that this example talks about a young person who we did the transition process with, but she could not wait until she was 18. She just said, I want children's services and local authority out of my life completely. So we stayed with her as long as we could and supported her as long as we could. She did have significant vulnerabilities, sexual exploitation, risk of mental health, and all different things. But what we did is we just stuck with her and did a sort of long arm approach until we had the opportunity to re-engage her. And in doing so, we managed to find and identify a service that was significantly lower in cost than she was in when she was a child, under 18, if you see what I mean. So that was a really, really good, and it's a useful example of some of the work you can do in terms of staying engaged with young people who are vulnerable post-18. I'll keep moving. You're going to hear my voice for a little while, but I'll keep going. I put also in there some parent feedback. It's always good to hear some feedback from parents about their experience, and this one is a positive one. We haven't had any negatives thus far. In terms of group membership and the structure of the team, our governance structure includes a full steering board and a strategic operational group and 5 of the dedicated work streams. We also have the strategic oversight from the corporate director, and also Anne Graham also chairs the transitions full board. So, and that membership consists of representatives from across the organisation, from health, from education, from mental health, and so on. They're all represented on the board, and it's a really good cross-fertilisation of ideas and thoughts and so on about the best thing to do. You'll hear some more about housing today, and also around health. Haven't been able to make a contribution, but they are involved. But you'll hear some more about housing, particularly around supported living and things like that, and what we're thinking of doing more long term. In terms of preparation for adulthood, what we're looking forward to is working with the locality managers, and we have a very close working relationship with our colleagues in adults, and that's improving all the time. That's improving, and to be honest, it's not possible to do effective transitions without very close working relationship with our colleagues in adults. So they chair the weekly, they attend the SEN panel, members of the adults team attend that. There's a monthly transition panel which is chaired by the adult social care service managers, but also occasionally social workers from the service manager from our team also chairs those meetings. And that transition panel looks at the number of young people who are moving from children to adults who've been identified for a Care Act assessment. So it's jointly chaired and it shares the information between the two of us. Every 6 weeks we have an operational group which is chaired by the directors in children's services and in adults. Again, a good example of working together, a sort of collaborative approach. And I'll keep moving because of the time. You will also see on page 10 the group membership in terms of the organogram, and it's pretty much speaks for itself. But if you look at the 5 groups at the bottom, those first 4 are representative of the preparation for adulthood outcomes. And the idea is that they will work with the transition team to support the work we're doing, to strengthen the pathways and make transitions for those young people as clear and as smooth as possible. Some of the key headlines are there. I won't go over them, but you know, they're there available for any questions around that. And then co-production is our next point, and it's encouraging actually to speak about the involvement that we have from parent carers and young people. We had a young person on our board who made very interesting, valuable contributions, but he decided he wanted to join one of the other groups, the education group, because I think that was an area that he had more interest in. So yes, we've had that contribution. We've also got representatives from the Parent Carers Forum on most of the 4 work streams as well. Again, we've co-produced 1 or 2 pieces of work, and there's other work that we're going to be doing going forward, and we're grateful for their comments and observations. And contributions, of course. I think I've come to the, yeah. Okay.
Have you come to a natural stop at that
Yes.
point? Okay, well, Dennis, I'm going to say you did that brilliantly. Thank you very much. That was really helpful. You picked out lots of points, I think, that we're going to now be able to ask more questions on. Sure. So I appreciate you doing that. So I've got Councillor Brennan with the hand up first. I'm just going to take hands so I see them. I've got Councillor Horan, Councillor Donovan, Councillor Guinness, Councillor Abel. So we're just going to, if you just take 3 at a time. Oh, sorry, Councillor Mason, I didn't see your hand. Apologies. So if you can take yourselves in groups of 3, ask the questions, and then the next 3, because I won't remember what order I called. So.
When you filled all the places in your original roles, it all sounds wonderful. Can I just confirm that these are all permanent? We're not using agency staff. And lower down, below these top posts, how are we doing on not working with agency staff?
There are 6 posts in the service, and all of them are fixed-term contracted posts. There are no agency staff in our team. Lower down, I'm not sure any lower. that's the. Do you want to answer that?
If I may, so the transition team has 6 workers, and they're all fixed-term contract or permanent. Thank you. There isn't a lower down to speak of. There are people who are case holders, but that's another part of the service. And we do have agency workers in the service, but we work to keep them to a minimum. I'm really pleased to tell you that in children's social care, for example, the the percentage is well below 20%. It's about 17%, which is really good. Yes, about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, it was in the late 20s, early 30s. So we're doing, we're going in the right direction and continue to. One of the things we talk about all the time is about reducing the number of agency workers and moving people to fixed-term contracts as much as we can. I hope that's yes. So, yes. So it's just the 6 workers in the team.
Is that Councillor Horan?
Thank you, Dion, Dennis, and the team. I have actually quite a lot of questions, but I'll just stick to maybe a couple. The case study that you put forward is very, very helpful, but it was a positive story. And I don't think that's the case universally, that you're going to just hear positive stories. Can you give an example maybe of a not so positive story and how you overcame that challenge? And maybe just with this particular case, if you didn't have the transition team in place, what do you think would be the outcome for this person? So maybe that would be my first part of the question, if you don't mind.
Yes, I suspect.
Would you like me to come in?
Please, yes,
yeah,
please
yeah. So, Councillor, thank you very much for your question. I think that we are a service that works with people who have needs, both children and adults. And so I think we can all build scenarios where there are needs for children and young people. And so I'm not and then what we do is we work hard to address those needs. And you'd have heard in this scenario that the young person wanted us out of their life. But you can see the challenges that the young person was facing. I suppose it would have all gone wrong if we weren't in the young person's life. So does that help by way of, there are sort of extremes, and I'm not saying that those are those which we deal with, but we all hear about young people who can't get access to CAMS, who can't get access to the services that they need. Some young people, there isn't suitable housing. We have all those cases in Haringey, but we work hard to address them. So I didn't want to put Dennis in a difficult position to paint a scenario where we were I don't know, talking about, but we work to address need. I hope that's a helpful response.
What I'm asking is, what has the transition team done different than before the transition team in place, is what I'm really trying to get at, right? Obviously, we've put a lot of resources here to address a problem, but what have you done that's different from what you would have done previously?
Okay, so that's a great question. Thank you. What we've done differently is, in this particular case, for example, this young person, as I said, I don't know quite why, we don't know the story behind all of that, why she wanted the local authority out of her life. Probably because she felt there was too many restrictions and, the safeguards and so on that were in place. However, the reality for her is that there were a number of vulnerabilities that meant that she was exposed to risk of harm in the community, from either people taking advantage of her financially, dare I say, sexually and otherwise. And so the fact that we were able to stay close by and just keep in touch with her, and until she eventually kind of came to realize that I need help and I'm going to accept this help. Now, if we were not in her life, then it's hard to say exactly what the outcome might have been. But thinking about the team and the work we've done, we've worked with about 27 or 28 young people to date and have completed those Care Act assessments, mental capacity assessments and so on. Some of those young people, well, all of those young people would have eventually received a service from our colleagues in adults. What we've just done is contributed to their work by enabling an early intervention, an early transition process. So instead of maybe waiting a month or 2 months, we're in early. And so we can start to plan better, and we can start to work with the parent carer, with the young person, to think forward about what they see as a good future for themselves. And I think the key for us is early, that we were in maybe a little bit earlier than before. That's all.
Thank you. I'll wait for the next question, just in case you allow others to ask. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cross-Pop, you next. So it's...
Oh, it's me and
yeah,
Sean and
you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dennis and Dion, for your presentation. I mean, I was really pleased, Dennis, that you keep mentioning that it's about identifying earlier young people who would benefit from. So that was a really good focus. And I think historically, there were issues that obviously young people were coming of age where they needed to move into the adult social care, but that transition wasn't straightforward, and there wasn't much thought put into identifying that earlier. I mean, obviously we know that there's a number of young people in our caseload who would probably need support as adults. Yeah, I mean, identifying that earlier, as early as possible, it will help that young people massively. So that's something that I really welcome and I wanted to mention. The other, I suppose my main question is, you kind of mentioned that in a way the health is still not very much part of the process. I mean, the interdepartmental build-up or close work is working well, which again, I welcome that, because historically, I think the main issues were between adult social services or children's social services and the housing. So it felt like there were different rules being applied based on, whereas close working would help the young person to transition smoothly, as well as making possibly even cost saving as well, because effectively if you deliver good support, then everybody's happy and you don't need extra resources. So my question is, why is health not part of that? Because obviously health very much needs to be part of that, so that they can be, in terms of like the Care Act assessment, obviously some of the young people will have medical needs that needs to be quickly assessed and made part of the support that they require. So any kind of advice, I mean, your thought on that, why is, or when is health going to be becoming a part of the transition service? Thank you.
So I was going to look maybe to Joe. Sorry, Dennis. Obviously, you should come in as well, but I do recognise that health is more in within Joe and Sarah's remit here. So, Joe, if you'd like to come in on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think, so really what we're trying to build is an integrated transitions team with health at the core of that. And I think, as you say, Councillor, it's critical they're there. It's not an easy time to engage health at the moment. And I think we have struggled a little bit to get health round the table. Having said that, we've started discussions with our health colleagues about particularly looking at continuing healthcare funding and eligibility, which looks different across children and adults. So I think it's going to be important that whatever their issues around capacity, that we build in something within our governance that enables them to engage with us and plan for the children and young people in a more timely way. I have to say, as one of the older members of the team, I do remember when health were very much part of all transition work, were always represented at every meeting, but that has changed incrementally over years so that it is increasingly difficult to get them at meetings. That's not to say they're not involved, it's not to say they play a critical role, it's a capacity issue.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Joe. I do very much agree with what Joe has said, and just wanted to add a little correction to myself, because they were involved at the preparing for adult stage when SEND had their 2-year strategic plan. They were very much involved then. That was maybe going back, 18 months, a while ago. So they have played a part, but I think as pressures have increased, perhaps maybe not as present as before. That said, we have completed, I think it's between 5 and 6, what we call CHC assessments, which are joint transitions assessments with health. There has been some delay in their contributions to the support plans, and so some of those plans have not been completed on time. So there is a real challenge there, but I don't want to give the impression that they're not involved at all.
Hello, Sarah Sutton, Corporate Director for Adults, Housing and Health. I just wanted to add and make the panel aware that there was an item at the Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I think back in April, where Health and the Mental Health Trust presented some of the work that they have been doing on transitions, because obviously health and the aspects of health are different across the different organisations, and I'm not sure if those papers have been shared already, but that gave an update from a mental health perspective. Health were invited tonight but couldn't make the meeting, but that might be something that the panel want to consider for a future transition discussion with health partners.
I mean, based on the questions and the answers this evening, I think from the committee, it might be very sensible to recommend that we do get our health colleagues back, and especially around the answers on the CHC and the progress, because I know there's been some fantastic progress happening in this area in adults, so I'm just a little bit worried when I'm hearing that slowing down a bit. So I think we do need to keep that focus on, and I'm sure you're all doing that, but I think it would help for us also as a committee to say that's an area we're particularly focusing in on, and want some answers from our health colleagues in that area. So yeah, okay, thank you. So I've got Councillor Desneves, and then I've got Councillor About, and then I've got Amanda, and sorry, Councillor Mason, then Amanda. Got to get them in order. Okay, Councillor Donovan. You're just going to have to come in, because I'm just not going to remember this otherwise. But Councillor Desneves.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for letting me come in. I don't want to take up too much time, but it was just, I suppose, to cite what we've just talked about there, the difficulties with engaging health in the current context, which I think some will be aware to different extents. So just to bring that home, so you'll be aware that the government's announced the end of NHS England and the requirement of ICPs to cut 50% of their expenditure. So on top of the ICB, and those who know me know I've spent a lot of my time holding health to account. So, but I share some. I suppose we have to share some sympathy with the kind of level of change and disruption. All of that comes on the top of them having already made, I think, either 30 or 50% cuts. 30%. I was right first one. 30% cuts. So there's a lot of shifting sands. In the meanwhile, we're talking about neighbourhood working and how that connects with our localities work in adults. So there's a space for lots of potential, but just kind of contextualising why things are difficult at the moment, because there's just a hell of a lot of change and a lot of uncertainty about where certain responsibilities will lie when the dust clears and settles from the changes at the moment. I just thought it might be useful to cite that.
Brilliant, and that's really helpful. I think you're right with the shifting sands, but I think we also need to pinpoint areas that we have concerns around when we've heard from experts in the field here today. So I think for us, we just want to make sure that we just bring that out as part of the committee. So I'm now, I can't remember if it's Councillor Bell, but I'm just going to say you're next. Councillor Mason, Councillor Donovan, Amanda, we will get to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I have a question on the case study. I was particularly struck that the young person in this case study was in a placement that was costing Children's Services £126,730 a year. and then after the transition, she moved to a placement that cost significantly less. It's 33,540. We've, as a Children's Scrutiny Committee, we've occasionally touched upon the Competition and Markets Authority market study into the children's social care market, which found that some providers are making profits that don't, that one would not expect in a well-functioning market. Would you be able to explain why there's such a big difference in this particular case between the cost of the children's services placement and the placement after transition? And was this particular to this specific case, or is this a trend across the board?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. This isn't an unusual situation, and this is one of the factors that leads to the difference in the way that legally children's and adults operate differently. So in children's, we will commission a placement to meet the children's needs, and then at post 18 there'll be a different type of assessment that means that the young person can have a different level of accommodation. Sometimes that's that's with a high degree of independence. They have left care, and so they will be able to access housing benefits and that sort of thing that reduces the costs considerably. 126,000 isn't unusual, isn't particularly high for the annual cost of a child's placement. That's on the low side, actually. We sometimes have, it's more common for us to have placements sometimes at 15,000 a week. Yeah. As an extreme, at the very extreme end. But and that's not unusually high for London. Across London, they are in the high 20s sometimes. It is, like you say, the government is keen to look into this area to make sure that they can see what they can do to manage the market, and perhaps are considering ways of introducing caps on the profits that private companies can make. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks a lot, everybody. It's really good to hear about some of the great work that's going on. I was particularly pleased to see how much you were working around Housing First, because I've got direct experience of getting that going, and it's been amazing the way that it encourages people who have, some people, a woman I worked with at 52 had never ever had a key to her own property, and she came into a property and she successfully transitioned at 52. I know you wouldn't be doing that long, but it is a unique, and I think it's a very good service. I just want to know how big it is in terms of the cohorts you're working with. I'm assuming you're working with the community and voluntary sector, but do we have our own Housing First team?
Yeah, hi, I'm Maddie Watkins. I'm the Interim Assistant Director for Housing Demand. So we have two Housing First services in Haringey. So we have one which we directly deliver, which we were given grant funding for I think it was during the course of last year, which we've just started to kind of bring online. So that's using social housing, so using Haringey stock to provide support to people that will need it on a really long-term kind of ongoing basis. And then we also have a commission service, which is with St Mungo's. So we kind of work with the provider to do the same, actually, but that does have a mixed tenure as well. So we offer social housing, but then we also occasionally will work with someone to look at the private rented sector if that's going to be quicker as they await a kind of a more long-term secure housing move. So yeah, we do have the two services.
Sorry, can I ask another question, please? So one of the big issues that we've all been talking about, and I know you're really aware of, is the problem of the actual transition from children to adult services, how the number of young people who get lost in that transition, and particularly where CAMS to adult mental health services, and I could give you 100 stories if you like, but I'm sure you've got 1,000, of where they get lost within that system, and then eventually the children, as young adults, then come up elsewhere in the system. And so one of the things that we were very keen about was that we made sure that that transition went smoothly. Given that health isn't here, that's terrible. I don't know, I understand they're under loads of pressure, I get that, but the parents of these children and the children themselves and the schools are under a load of pressure as well, and we have to do our very, very best for them. And as councillors, we're representing, if you like, the unspoken voice of those people. So forgive me for being harsh, but the thing that I'm dealing with at the moment is 2 cases where a child was hospitalised before becoming 18 and was sitting within the CAMS service. She then transitioned to being 18, and Adult Social Services said, but she's under the NHS, and therefore we won't have anything to do with her. And now I'm trying to work with the parents to find out why, and why they all live in Haringey. Why can't she come under the Adult Social Care Services? She seems a really positive person for you to help. And that's not the only one. That's one person I'm working with. And I've got 2 other people I'm working with who are trying to access adult mental health services, and their children are at home, not doing anything, and they are stuck because they haven't been able to transition from CAMS. And I'm assuming their support was via health. So it's CAMS and school. So those were the 2 areas of support. They come into adulthood and those go away, but we can't. How do we get them into adult services? Thank you.
Councillor Mason-Sarah.
I'll just come in on the health point in slight defence of them, because I think in error they were invited to the committee late and couldn't make arrangements to be here. So I just wanted that to be clear to the panel that, I think if they could have made arrangements to come, and they might have been able to with earlier notice. On just going back to the joint overview and scrutiny, that was a particular focus on mental health CAMS and the transition into adult mental health services. I think it would be really good to talk about that with them next time, but they have got a series of programmes in place to try to manage that transition better, and some ambitions in that area to strengthen their offer there. I will hand to Jo to pick up the wider point around that interface between when it's health and mental health and CAMS, and the links then into adult social care.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I think there are lots of issues here to unpick. So I think the first thing is, in different local authorities, the mental health social workers in adults can be embedded, for want of a better word, within health under Section 75 arrangement or something similar. Or in our council, they are completely separate to the NHS, and they're employed by the council. And usually there is much confusion for parent carers, families, around which pathway, if I can use that word, which pathway the young person will go down when they transition over. So will they have a care coordinator from the NHS, or will they have an adult mental health social worker? And I think one of the things that we need to do much more on in adult social care is actually having really clear information and advice as a starting point, so families are clearer as to what that transition might look like. But also on Sarah's point, and building into what Dennis has described earlier, one of our working groups, I think we need to be sitting down and looking at some actual real life families and what their lived experiences of CAMS, and how we can support them so there isn't another cliff edge when they move over. It isn't straightforward within the mental health system where you end up. It's absolutely unbelievably tricky, and for some people they don't want to be part of statutory services as they transition to adulthood, and there are all sorts of issues there around mental capacity and choice and control and many other things. Either way, it could be a lot easier than it is for a lot of people.
Okay, thank you. So I think maybe a recommendation from this committee is that we take this offline then and speak to our health colleagues about this issue, and say that it's come up in the committee today and how would these services actually work together in Haringey effectively? Because I think the bottom line is working out who they contact. So as councillors, we need to know who to refer, who to say, right, if this you're not getting through, or this is a problem, this is the person to get in touch with, or this is the service, I should say, to get in touch with. So it can be really easy for people to understand. And maybe if I don't know, do we have that on our website? How if parents come through to Haringey website and they're trying to work out how to navigate that system, do we have anything? I'm not asking for an answer now, but if we could then look at that maybe and put that information on there, that would be really helpful. So thank you. So Councillor Donovan.
Okay. The case study that we were talking about, and this may be an example, I don't want to sort of make up her history, but this may be an example of something that a lot of people have been thinking about recently in terms of grooming gangs and vulnerable young women in particular, either who are in care or have fallen out of school or for some reason reject schooling. I think it says here that she was not just only rejecting school but also children's services, and she was absconding, and she sounds like somebody who may possibly fall victim to grooming gangs, although in this case it looks as though that was identified, and she was then given support, timely and effective support from adult services, and thankfully this does, as my colleague said earlier, this does seem to be a success story. So my other question is, in terms of, because I think this does link, the whole transition does link to the whole grooming gangs, protecting young women and young men as well from drug exploitation from those gangs. How do you feel our transition success, how do you think our transition process will help to alleviate that?
So I think the case study was in the section of the slides that I was going to talk to. So in this specific example, she was living within one of the supported housing services, and then she kind of moved into another more settled Housing First supported housing service. But I guess on the point around employment and kind of benefits maximisation, as we hear continuously from young women that one of the reasons for sex work or transactional sex might be that they're not clear on what their benefits entitlement might be, they don't know how to navigate employment, and that creates a huge kind of volume of time in which is empty. So what we do in the supported housing services is kind of ensure that that's filled. So look at training opportunities, employment opportunities, how we can support people to do the things that they want to do, to kind of steer away from that. So that was one of the things that happened in this case. And then I guess when it does go wrong and there is a crisis and we see signs that someone is being sexually exploited, how do we parachute in that emergency response to ensure that it's stopped as soon as we can do that? So I guess that's one of the approaches that we use. And then when we see people moving into accommodation that might be more isolated, so self-contained council flats, is we really look to commission services that respond to that. So people feel really isolated when they live alone and they've never lived alone before because they might have been in foster care or other types of placements where they've lived with other people, is we really kind of ensure that there's someone visiting, that support is there in place when they need it to respond to that. So I hope that kind of answers a little bit, but let me know if there's more questions I can.
I think that does from the housing point of view. I was thinking more also in terms of children 14, 15 who are at school but need to be more treated like an adult because they're rejecting that. You know, how.
So Councillor, thank you for your question. I think we're here really to talk about the transitions work, and we might have gone further outside of that scope. And I know that we are, and I will respond to your question, but I'm just mindful of we're only through part 1 of our slides, and we've got a load more to get through. And so in terms of the contextual safeguarding, which I think is what you're referring to, it is incredibly complicated. And we work very hard with the police and with services to address those issues. Sometimes that means that we will receive children into care and place them in different parts of the country, but we respond to each case on their own. It is an incredibly complicated area of work. We treat children as children, and that's one of the things that we're determined to do, because sometimes young people are seen as adults making their own choices, when in fact they're being groomed by people. And so we're determined to always, even though our young people, I'm slipping into it myself, our children aged 16, 17 don't like to be referred to as children, but we sometimes purposefully use that in meetings so that it just sort of brings the issue back. And I am pleased, that is no disrespect to you and your comments. It's about how we professionally address the situation. So when we're dealing with the police, you'll hear of the work that happened in Rotherham in particular, and it was, and we're all learning from that. And one of the notions was adultification, that these are young girls making their own decisions with their boyfriends. No, they're young girls who are groomed, who have been who have then become invisible to the system. So we learn from all of that, and we're seeking to further improve on that going forward. I hope that helps in some way answer the question. Okay, thank you.
You had your first question as well, didn't you, on slide 1? So have we had answers to that? Yeah. Do you want to put your mic on? Sorry.
Yeah, it's about how to identify vulnerable children or adults, young adults who don't meet the statutory thresholds and aren't receiving children's services, but may need adult services in terms of housing, and their parents would as well, in terms of housing housing, employment, training, and advice.
So I think we've spoken, so some people refer to transitions as preparing for adulthood, and some people refer to it as transitions. For me, they're one and the same piece. And I think the real joy of being here this evening is that in this council we're trying to have a corporate responsible working across services. So in adult social care, I think transition to employment has not been as strong as it should be. So we've got our internships, and we support adults in the borough into apprenticeships. But I think other authorities have done a lot more work with inclusive apprenticeships, where there's less focus on the need for GCSE English and maths, just a more inclusive approach basically. And I think there's more work to do here in terms of what happens to those young people who don't get paid work after a supported internship. Who and how are they picked up, and how are they supported? I think In other authorities I've worked in, there's been a disability employment network to look at a range of residents with different disabilities, learning disabilities, physical disabilities, sensory disabilities, to look at the employment offer. And I think we need to do more work there. In social care, historically, when councils had more money, there were commissioned services in and around employment jointly with the NHS. In many boroughs in London, we jointly commissioned employment services for residents with mental health issues, learning disabilities, etc. Over the years I've been employed, that's changed. So we need to look at creative ways of looking at what there is out there to build on. And I think, Councillor Desnes, I think you had a meeting recently to look at employment. You maybe want to add something there.
I suppose just to add, there are some slides around the employment support linked to transitions, and we do have a colleague, Sharon Bolton, joining us online, who might be able to substantively cover any questions around that. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll hold that to come in at that point, if that's all right, Councillor Donovan. I think we're going to move on to Amanda's questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Great presentation. I wanted to address something that you had asked earlier as a parent and also as the Chair of Power. Very rare, Haringey, take the win. One of the differences is that parents and young people are involved at a strategic level, which enables us to really inform the local authority officers of what really is happening, as I say, in the trenches, boots on the ground. As far as the transitions for young people, and like your story, I can't remember your name, like you had said, transitions and preparing for adulthood and employment, for us as parents is all one and the same thing. One of our concerns at Send Power, and also with what I hear daily from parents and families and young people themselves, is about the vulnerable young adults who may not meet the statutory threshold. And we've kind of bashed this out in various meetings, Dennis, as you know. And it's really important because there are a lot of young people who don't meet the threshold. I'm always singing about my son who did a very successful supported internship and now works at the National Theatre. However, if there are issues around travelling, he's on the phone, he's 24 years old, he can travel from point A to point B. There are a lot of my Joshuas in this world and that live in this borough who, if they don't have a support structure, then how do they get picked up? With the example, the case study, that was great. It would be really nice to see evidence of, if it doesn't quite work that smoothly, what's in place, because this is the kind of thing that petrifies families, parents, myself included. And so these are the kind of things that kind of really need to be addressed. What is the criteria and the threshold then for those that don't have the glaring needs, which would immediately activate the transition between children to adult services? What about those who don't meet that? How are you proposing to invite these families or these young people to the party? How are you proposing to hear their voices for the ones that are not working so well? I am told I'm balanced and measured, so I really like to hear the great stories that are working well. But in reality, when we don't hear about the things that are maybe not going so well, and okay, this person or this family had not such a great experience, but we were able to do this to enable them to get that, so that they can. These are the kind of things of everything that I've heard today. I kind of haven't really heard that, and I can hear the myriad of families that are going, why didn't you ask this? Why didn't you? Because for us, it is something that is real. We would really love our children to be able to go into to have independent living and be able to be housed independently and live independently. But if we don't have a system where we are working co-productively with parents, with carers, with families, and including siblings and the young people, how do you teach a child or young person how to manage money? How to, transition from, this word transition, from doing something that is, voluntary, because that's what initially builds their confidence for some of them, and then they will then transition into paid employment. How do you teach them that their time is valued and they are valuable if we're following guidelines and not thinking out of the box to give them paid, supported internships, so that they understand the mutual exchange of, they give a service, they receive a little funds in their bank account, which is for them even yoking. When you talk about children and young people who are neurodiverse and adults, I am one, things need to make sense. Things need, and the simplest way to do that is just to kind of have conversations, meet them where they are. If you want a bigger uptake with, say, supported internships, for example, then the thing that you need to do is to have more things available. We have a wealth of resources in our borough, whether it's local businesses, whether it is, Sendias, Markfield, Senpower, the local authority, the myriad of businesses and grassroots organisations that are in Haringey, that at a drop of a hat, if these conversations were had, then there wouldn't be so much pressure on yourselves, because you've got a wealth of partners that actually you don't see. So my question is, how are you proposing to think out of the box to make real tangible changes for our young people? It's all right having me or any of my team in the room, or families in the room at strategic meetings and stuff, but if you're not if you don't have the language to meet the young people more than who are in, say, elevated youth, if you can't reach those families, those young people, if you are speaking in a language that, and I'm not talking about English being the second language, I'm talking in a cultural way where you would be able to meet those underrepresented communities, because you have to remember that there are things culturally that do not happen in the countries that they came from that happen here. So why would they know how to access it? Where will they go to access it? If you're talking about special needs in particular, if you're talking about, there are communities that are very quiet about what is going on in their families around SEND. So those young children and young people are immediately missed. How are we going to kind of, because for me, as a mum of an adult who is 24, but actually in his thinking is quite juvenile in his thinking. So how are you going to support those young people is my question. Thank you.
Right, there's actually quite a lot there, so to unpick. So I'm opening it up. So I'm just going to look round to who wants to lead on this. Is it Dennis or Councillor or Maddie? Okay, Dennis, you start. Thank you.
Okay, Dennis will start off. So thank you for your question, Amanda. It's a huge question, and I don't propose to provide an answer to all of it, because I don't know some of it. I can only speak in the narrow corridor in which I'm working. So of the, let us say, of the 50 referrals that we received, after we've completed the CARE Act, the assessment, those young people who are identified as having care and support needs, they would then have a support plan, and that work would take off from there. Those who are not deemed to be eligible as such. They are, and these seem to be the group that you're referring to. We're doing some work, and I'm not saying that it's perfect, but what we're doing is we use that phrase signposting and guiding those families to the local offer, and we've started to create a directory of all of the services, community services in the borough, to particularly if that young person says, oh, I'm really interested in employment, I want to try and find work, then we signpost them to the range of employment services that are in the borough. You're going to hear, perhaps later on in the slides, the work that Haringey Works are doing, some really fantastic pieces of initiatives that are coming for 16-year-olds, 16 to 18s, that maybe they could be picked up through that initiative and other services in the community. So that's what we're doing. We're signposting and supporting those families, parent carers, to where the information is. That's what our team is doing. I can't speak wider than that. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, is that all right? So I just wanted to kind of respond on the what happens for young people that do not meet those statutory thresholds of children's services and adult services in relation to housing and support. So I just wanted to respond on that to say that we do commission over 500 units of accommodation for people that are in between those two services. So this is non-statutory supported accommodation. And I guess it's really important to say about this is while it's a roof over someone's head, a young person's head, it's also that wraparound stuff that you mentioned. So it's things like that phone call while someone's on their way to an interview, you know, kind of meeting people where they're at, and it's really tailored to meet specific needs, whether it's an LD, whether it's special educational needs, whether it's mental health, or just kind of responding to lower level support needs as well. So I guess it's really important to say that. And then I think the second thing that came out from what you said was around the co-design of services. And I think this is really important for us to talk about. We're looking at going out to tender at the moment for our young people services, and the first thing that we did as part of that was speak to young people. So I think co-design or consultation, co-production are really kind of just big words for just speaking to people about what they need and what they want in supported accommodation. So that's one of the things that we did. And sometimes it's important for us to recognise as well that we might not be the best people to have those conversations. It might be really off-putting to sit down with me or someone else to say, this is what I need in accommodation. So also recognising when we need to get someone else to have that conversation for us because they're better placed. Whether it's a young person that's been through these types of services or someone else. So yeah, we really tried to kind of talk to people the way that they want to be spoken to and have the conversations that they want to have. I recognise as well that 500 units of supported accommodation that is in between statutory services is not enough, it's not a panacea, but I guess what it is a starting point for us to understand what we need. And to offer that really kind of wraparound support for the period of time that people are in there.
Thank you. Just jump back in for a second. I was also, I might be slightly off-piste here, but I just want to make this comment as well, that in our recent budget discussions, we talked about the transition protocol, I think it's called, I've forgotten the exact phrase, where all our partners in the borough signed up to transitional safeguarding. It was a protocol that was established, and we all signed up to it, loads of partners and different organisations in the borough. And we'd been thinking about how we could revisit that protocol and ask providers whether they feel able to contribute to a small team who would then be directly supporting these young people that Amanda's referring to, because we accept that there is a need there, and no one person is picking that up, and so that might be something that we'll look at, you know, going forward. But you know, that's a slightly wider point. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I've lost count of hands, and I was just wondering whether it was timely now to move on to housing. I think we've discussed some of the issues, but I don't want to jump ahead.
We're not quite there yet,
Oh,
Anne.
I'm
So
very
when,
sorry.
you know when I said at the very beginning, we're going to have to whip through these slides because there's going to be tons of questions.
Yes.
Trust me, this is the bit. So
Yes.
I've got Councillor Guinness. Sorry, Amanda, just before we move on, Amanda, can I just check that your questions were answered? There'll be some slides later on about apprenticeship schemes and going further into work. So just checking.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I did have one very small question that I forgot to ask. Can I just, it's very small, it's very brief.
If you ask that now and then Councillor Guinness, you ask your questions and then they can be asked in the round. I think Councillor O'Donovan, we have to move on because I think we're maybe on the next round, Councillor O'Donovan, you can come back in first.
We were told Health not having enough notice to attend, and the question I had put was why? Because if we are talking about SEND, H is in there, which is the health and, with the education. So as Sen Power asked for 21 days notice for something coming up, I don't understand why health didn't get the memo, why they got the memo late for them to attend.
I think it was an officer oversight. So I think as part of the pre-planning, we had suggested that they were invited, and I just think there was a mistake made. It was nothing more than that.
I respect your honesty. Thank you.
Great. Just to follow up on follow from Amanda's question in terms of those young people who are not going to end up like they wouldn't qualify for a Care Act assessment and subsequently receive the support that they require, but they will be basically mild form of, some sort of condition or being neurodivergent kind of categories. I wanted to ask what support are we going to offer to them, and what the reason I kind of said that, I wanted to ask a question because obviously I dealt with a case work in demonstrating quite a lot of things that Amanda said in terms of like parents' inability to be able to tell whether the child needs special needs earlier on, and cultural issues. I suppose every parent in certain cultures, people want to project that their children are absolutely normal. They're kind of not to sort of then subsequently, in this particular case, it became apparent that the young person was on neurodivergent spectrum of some kind, but the issue was only diagnosed became a problem in relation to unsuitable accommodation. Then obviously the battle between housing and was not that great as well, because the housing was denying that they knew the knowledge that the resident was living with a now an 18-year-old teenage son. So basically on occasion like that, and then obviously the young person end up leaving the education. So it was like building, you can see that the vulnerability is building, and he's becoming angry, upset with his mom, and because he doesn't have his own room, doesn't have his own space, but also not attending his education. Yeah, extreme risk to, possibly other things. So I just wanted to know what kind of, when you mentioned them, is that there could be, in going forward within the transition, additional maybe posts or allocated resources to actually deal with this kind of cases. I think that will be really useful, because then even counsellors could refer when they are kind of coming across these kind of cases where there is a difficulty in establishing how to support the family or how to help them. Sorry, I will leave it there. I know it's been just long and okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I think the whole multidisciplinary approach is what we need for the kind of example you've given there. So when members write to adult social care, quite often the resident has approached you as members because they feel desperate, that they've had to go to 6 different people with different issues, but all really, as Amanda said, they just want solutions. And I think we've all had good experience of panel arrangements that work well. We've all had those experiences where sometimes they're called complex cases panel. They're awful terminology, but if it means that you get to a solution for a family and that their lived experience is heard and valued and they don't have to make 12 phone calls, then it has to be a good thing. I think the next stage of our development of the transition team will be to look at and review what panel arrangements we have to mitigate against people getting to a crisis situation where maybe housing, a support in a family, where they've got multiple complexity. Maybe sometimes family members have learning disabilities, then they have a young person with complex autism, maybe mental health. We've all had these kind of experiences. I think we need to do that bit of thinking because it stops people bouncing around, if I can use that expression. Lots of different officers, lots of counsellors, and sometimes not getting anywhere very fast.
Okay, so we're coming, so I know, and you're desperate to move us on. I'm just going to pick up a couple of things from the, from the last conversations that we've just had. So Dennis, I was really interested in hearing what you're saying about the safeguarding protocol and looking at voluntary groups and organisations around young people who wouldn't necessarily access statutory services, but actually they might, those, voluntary organisations may be able to be of use and of help within the cohort that don't reach those statutory services. So if that happens or something similar happens, that would be great to bring back to next year. So thank you for that. Another quick point just noted as we were going through around co-production. I think I would have been really interested to hear more about young people's aims, their KPIs, their outcomes. Now, I know we say KPIs, key performance indicators, but actually, they're also not going to speak like that. But nobody does. Nobody normally speaks like that. But what do they actually want to achieve? And how are we measuring within that co-production process whether what we have set out as a council actually does meet the needs of those young people, and how are we measuring that, and then how are we assessing that to ensure that actually it does what it says on the tin. So within the pack, on the co-production side, I didn't see that. Now, I'm sure there's tons of work going on. Maddie's alluded to some, others have alluded to it as we've gone through. But I think in the pack next time, if we get something around how that young person's voice is coming through within that co-produced pieces of work, and that would just give us confidence, then we know what questions to ask you, rather than asking a generically wide question. How is co-production working? We can then focus in on areas. And that brings me to my final bit on just this section. It is around KPIs. On the minutes from the last minute, of point I, on the co-design approach, the committee last year said that within the pack that we had last year, we couldn't really see what the key performance indicators were. We hadn't got the data within the pack. Now, I know that that may sound like we want lots more information, but that's so we ask less questions. So it's a really weird way of thinking about it. But if you put in more information, we then know what to focus in on. So if you give me lots of, you say, well, we've done 6 key performance indicators, then as a committee, we can look at those and think, oh, actually, and you say, well, the outcome was this. We can go, okay, so you helped 20 people out of 60. Are your KPIs the right KPIs? Do we need to challenge ourselves? What else are you doing in order to change that? We can't ask you those questions at this point because we don't have that information within the pack. And I fully appreciate to start asking you about that now is going to lengthen the meeting quite considerably. So I think I'll bring in Councillor Bravis on in a moment, but just to sort of say that actually is really quite helpful. I know it looks like you're giving us more, but actually it can then focus us in a lot more into areas that we really want to concentrate in on, rather than asking just about everything that comes before us. So that's all I had to say on that bit. I am going to move us on, but I am going to take Councillor Brabazon because she's indicated. Thank you.
Now, I just wanted to respond to that, Pippa, because I think we should remember this has only been running a year, and in local government, a year is nothing. Take a year to set something up. So for a service to have come from where it was, which was a nil base, to being able to produce a report like this, a series of slides with quite a lot of data in it, I think that we should, for all the caveats you've put in and for all the comments that people have made, I think it's worth commending the work, because it's an enormous amount of work that has gone on to into this, because it's such a complex area. And I know that Lucia and I were talking about transitions from 2021 and saying, why aren't we doing this together? Why isn't this happening? And to pull this together through the leadership of both services, to have a team that is collaborative in an area where before, I think you could probably say there's a lot of blood on the carpet in terms of who's paying for what and who's doing what and whose responsibility is it. Oh no, it's health. Oh yes, it's you. No, it's me. It's this one, that one. And everybody avoiding the elephant in the room of the costs and the difficulty, I think is really extraordinary. And it goes to Ty's question, which was, you know, why were you doing it? What if it wasn't there? Well, if it wasn't there, you would have the continual argument between services, largely about who's going to pay, but also avoiding the whole issue, or not avoiding, but not avoiding, what's the word I want? Not dealing with the so many presenting problems, which, as Amanda rightly points out, parents are looking at as their children get older. And it's such a holistic and you know, all-encompassing thing, whether it's about capacity, plans, work, housing, growing up, relationships. So it's just such an important area. And I really just wanted to say, because you asked about KPIs, and maybe you'll get more data next year, but actually, I think within these slides, to be fair, there is quite a lot of evidence of achievement.
So thank you, Councillor Brabazon, and I'd expect nothing less than your, you know, wholehearted enthusiasm and support of this. And to be fair, when we hit scrutiny, you know what it's like. If we could spend another 3 or 4 hours on all the great stuff, we would. But we can't just go through it. So, of course, we are going to pick up on areas that we are sort of, and we're not so sure about within the pack. Now, actually, you said in 2021, and I think there's an enormous amount of work underpinning this. I think the slight issue that I have, and it is a slight one, I'm just pointing this out at this point, and for next year, is that if we had a little bit more detail, then we could then work out where we're focusing in on, because I understand you have done an enormous amount of work. This just touches the surface of it. And I think actually a little bit more detail in some of these areas would allow us to be a little bit more focused for ourselves as a panel, so we know where to sort of focus in on the questions. But I am going to move us on, because I know that Anne is desperate to get to that next bit. So Anne, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose just to come in, I mean, there are on page 14 and 15 the initial summary KPIs and outcomes thus far. And whilst we have been working on the team for a year, actually it's only since September that the full team has been in place to be able to work on those outcomes. So I completely take the point, and I think we will be able to come back next year with some more substantive data. You have got the summary headlines on page, I think it's page 15 of the pack, and up on the slides now. And that's where we've got to so far, and we'll come back next time.
Okay. Very quickly, yes, right, on page 14, we have got the savings and KPIs, and I would welcome, and I hope other members of the panel would welcome, that if since September 24 we've saved £317,000 savings at the same time as improving the lives of, as it says here, up to 37 young children and young people. I think that's something that we should welcome. Obviously, when we look at it with the full year next year, we'll examine it in more detail, but I think that is something that is definitely should be welcomed.
No, that's great. So I'm just going to ask for questions. I mean, we'll come to that as part of the questions. So that is in the next part of the pack. So, Anne, yes, over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to actually take Joe's guidance as to who's doing the section on transition, housing and transitions. And Councillor, I know that we wanted to start one way, and I asked for your consideration, which you did grant, for us to go through the slides. So I think we will hand over to you and take the rest of the meeting how you would like it to go, because I think many of us would like to get home at some point this evening. We are very passionate about this work.
I certainly don't want to dampen any enthusiasm or passion. I just knew that there was going to be a lot of passion on this side as well around the questions. So I'm very grateful, but obviously please do expand a bit more on your answers if you'd want to tell us about the underpinning of the work that's been going on. So we're moving on then to, as Anna said, on homelessness and housing-related support. And commissioning housing supported services. So has the panel got any questions on the slides in the pack in this area? I've got Councillor Dunstorm.
Yeah, thank you. Just on slide 21, we're talking about recommissioning of young people's pathway. It says we're going to have up to 46 beds available across a number of kind of dedicated services. I was just wondering what demand was for that, what kind of presentation we had of, I guess, what, 16 to 21 or 15 to 24? And, yeah, what kind of thing is that?
Yeah, so it is 46 units of accommodation that we'll look to recommission. I think it's probably fair to say that demand for that type of accommodation far outstrips the supply. That's not, so while we are commissioning specialist services for young people, that's not to say that young people can't live in other types of supported accommodation as well. So it's not ring-fenced just for them at the cost of kind of all of the other units that they might be better placed in. For example, we also have the mental health pathway, and we also have floating support services that can support people in the community. But yeah, I mean, we see a very high number of presentations of people that need accommodation, and we're also really aware that people are living in quite overcrowded conditions in the private rented sector and also in social housing. So yeah, we are looking all the time at all the different possible grant sources that we can apply to the government, the GLA, any organisation really, to get some additional funding for. We've been relatively successful in this over the past couple of years, and that's where the Housing First programme has come from. But yeah, I mean, we would like to deliver more services because we know that there is a need. The only thing that also I would kind of add on to the end of that, which I think is good news, is we historically and currently see low numbers of young people and care leavers rough sleeping in Haringey. I think that speaks to this type of partnership and the work that we do across the board to ensure that that doesn't happen. I haven't got the exact number in front of me, but I know that comparably we compare really well to neighbours in that space.
I'm guessing you're not going to have this to hand, but do you have figures for, like, do we capture that data in terms of 16 to 24-year-olds presenting as homeless, or do we just capture this number of people? We'll probably capture 16 to 18 because there'll be children, but are we capturing them specifically as young people, or is it just homelessness presentations in general?
Yeah, no, we absolutely are capturing the kind of demographic data around age and need and the specific ways in which that cohort presents as homeless. And also, I think, probably more importantly, the places that they go to before they're homeless. Because what we want to do, ideally, is capture them before they present to the local authority at the front door. So I think that's one of the things that we're looking into. And it's not in the same places that older rough sleepers and older people, single adults experiencing homelessness do. There's some really interesting programs about using data, so looking at the households that are severely overcrowded and thinking about a targeted approach to those young people. There will come a point at which that kind of family dynamic often breaks down and where we need mediation services to respond to that. Yeah, apologies that I don't have the data in front of me, and I kind of acknowledge the point that it would have been useful to have that within the slide pack.
You triggered something else in my thinking there. On the next slide, it says about specialist support commission services. Systems advice do fantastic work. However, I'm just wondering whether they are the best service for children and young people. They can perhaps be a little inaccessible and a bit more challenging for young people to access those sorts of services potentially, or whether systems advice are doing some specialist work in that space. I don't even know if there are young people's IOG services that are specialists like that, but...
Yeah, absolutely. So our citizens advice services is part of our kind of information, advice and guidance service. It is generic, so it kind of applies across the borough irregardless of age range. They do a really good job, but what I would say is it is kind of widely acknowledged that specialist services are specifically helpful in this space. So young people access and need different types of services, and it is really daunting to kind of just walk into a big open plan office and kind of talk about your needs and that you're homeless, I guess. So we do really acknowledge that, and I think that is incorporated into the thinking around commissioning the young people services going forward. We are a little bit kind of limited by the budget envelope and what we can do, but certainly over the next couple of years we're going to look at the information, advice and guidance offer as a whole across the borough as that comes to the natural end of the contract that we have in place, and we will be thinking about within that what needs a specialism. So mental health, older people, young people usually form part of that conversation.
It's my fault. Councillor Brennan, you had your hand up at the end of the last session. Did you want to come in on a question? Because I've got Councillor Haran and then Councillor Brennan. Question for you. Yeah.
Yeah, two questions. The first one, I think, Councillor Donovan had asked earlier about the case. Are we talking about the young? We're coming to the on page 21 overview of the case.
Yeah, the housing. Yeah.
So my question is, I was really concerned that the risks were only observed after she had moved in. So why was there such a delay in picking up the risks? So that was one question. Then the other is, look, I know housing is a real big challenge, and I know we're not supposed to bring casework here, but I'm just kind of trying to how to frame this question is, I've come across challenges of essentially people transitioning after the age of 25, because not everyone, I think, can transition between your stipulated age 14 to 25. Some people take a little bit longer. So in this particular case, it was in their early 30s where they want to transition away from living with their family to live alone, and the challenges that this person faced getting into a home. It was a private home that they actually found themselves. So I don't want to specifically talk about this case. I think in the wider context is, how do you support people who transition after the age of 25, and are there real challenges in that cohort of people? I don't know whether that's necessary, the limit here. It's still transition, it's still the same cohort of people with the same challenges. It's just outside maybe potentially the scope of this.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I think in response to your first question, and from working in supported housing services, especially with women and women that might have experienced rough sleeping, it is a really fine balancing act of promoting engagement, so having conversations and trying to build that rapport and trust. The accommodation services aren't they're not kind of prisons, and we're not asking people to kind of check in. They're allowed to come and go as they please. People can spend nights away from the services. They can have guests on occasion if we have kind of risk assessed that. So I think it's fair to say there's a level of independence, even though these are staffed sites that have members of staff working there. So what that means is you kind of build a risk profile over time of the things that might suggest that there's things going on like sexual exploitation or kind of gang grooming. So I think that was what happened in this specific scenario. And it was a short while after she moved in. So I guess what it's fair to say is that people are living behind doors, and that's where these types of things often take place. So it took a while to kind of understand that with her specifically in the service, and then to get the correct services involved as appropriate. And then I think in regard to your second question, yes, I think the under 35 cohort of people is specifically difficult to support because of the way the benefit system works. So there's different affordability criteria. People can't necessarily live alone if they want to live alone because there's caps on housing benefit and the money that people can claim to do that. So I think with that cohort specifically, if you're over 35, it creates more options available in the community, in the private rented sector. And obviously all of our supported housing services, there isn't necessarily a kind of strict age criteria. We look at what people need and then we provide that type of accommodation. So yeah, with regard to supported housing, it's not necessarily a barrier to entry at all.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Brennan, Councillor Groskopf, and do you want to answer the question? Yeah, Councillor Lawton.
This is slightly building on what Councillor Connor said about more detail. For me, I am aware, we're all aware, that there's a lot of pressure on councillors to increase the standard of care, provide better service, but also savings. And when I read this report, it's very impressive, really impressive. It looks like we're doing both. The only thing that, for me, is missing is that sometimes there seem to be statements saying, we've got better service and we've managed to save this. We're just not saying how, saying the link, what you've actually done to provide the better service and do the savings. I would really like to know that, because then I would be really impressed, but I would just feel like the dots were filled in. So, so it was actually on the savings and KPIs on the previous section where I was thinking, although it says through undertaking these assessments, the new service was able to achieve blah, 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 317,000 pounds of savings. It doesn't make the link in, what was it about undertaking those assessments that made you able to save so much money? I mean, it seems like there's a bit of a gap.
In the example that we gave, where we indicated the saving that we made, we talked about the fact that she was no longer placed in a much more expensive placement. And so by completing the Care Act assessment and the support plan and identifying where her vulnerabilities were and recognizing that she needed to be in a place where she was going to be kept safe and supported to live a safer life, if you like. So I would argue that that is an indication of how we did it. We worked with her, we heard her voice, we listened to what her interests and her wishes were, completed the support plan, identified the right type of support where she can come and go, but at the same time get support if she needed around things like cooking skills. I know that she struggled a bit with how to do that. She was supported in that, the workers that were in that home would provide that support to her as and when she was ready to receive that. So, and then the savings is you're no longer in X placement, which costs Y amount. Now you're in this placement, and that's the saving. And within the work that the transition team was set up to do, part of it is about savings as well as quality work. So we do try to indicate where we think we've made a savings we like to draw that to your attention.
So it's a very large amount of savings that you've actually made. I totally understand how you've made that saving, but it's a massive amount of savings that you seem to have made. It sounds such a good approach that you would expect that it would be sort of like instinctive to have been already in place, the approach that you're talking about. But anyway, it's very impressive. But does it also include the cost of employing the 6 people who are actually doing the role, making the savings, if you see what I mean? Or does that not get taken into account? I mean, not that I'm not objecting at all to employing the 6 people to do that very good job. I'm just interested to know.
Thank you for your question. No, it doesn't include the costs of the staff. That what we did was we couldn't do this work before. We needed the capacity to do it, and so we put forward a business case that gave us the capacity, the 6 people and some other bits. And so this literally is the difference in one care package as it transitions over to adults. Thank you.
Okay, and I think what would be interesting, but not this time, next time, to be really clear, on slide, I think you're page 14, where you've got your £317,000 of savings. I'm assuming that's to do with the 5 carers assessments, healthcare, the mental, everything else, because you've got a lot more than just that one case study. So I think it's really just unpicking that a little bit more, but completely take your point. Around getting more details for the next year on those sorts of areas, just to sort of understand that a little bit more. Thank you. Councillor Groskopf.
So on page 19, you speak about the service for 46 people for accommodation. And I'm just wondering, there was a similar scheme for homelessness. And when it came in, the residents of that community said it's not, I mean, where it was placed, it's not going to work, it's not going to work. And it didn't work, and the council pulled the plug on it. I'm just wondering, and they were told it's not rough sleepers, it's homelessness, and I hear it's homelessness, and I'm just wondering, what is a council going to put in place to make sure that we've learned from our mistakes, that we get the residents on board where it's going to take place, and we're not going to go through the same issues that we went through as the last time. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I don't mind responding to that. So we're looking at retendering an existing service. So these units already exist in the community, and they have done for a number of years. So I think some of the learning from the scheme that you mentioned was around the number of units in one place and the kind of location within the community. With the young people's services and the young people's pathway, it's 46 places, but they're split across a range of different geographical locations. And also a number of different providers. So it's not one provider that's delivering all those bed spaces. It's different things within what we would describe as a pathway. So when we go out to tender, what will be included in that tender is kind of a plan for how to deliver those from the existing building provision that we have available. So it's not necessarily the same thing as kind of saying deliver 46 units and then someone does that in a place. It's a slightly different thing.
A couple of questions. One, if I may. Yeah. One is just a quick point of clarification on page 22. It says we currently have 32 care leavers in the pathway, which is an increase from 34. I'm just checking, is that a mistake or are we? Yeah.
Apologies for that. That is a mistake.
Is it just the other way round? Is that and then it's just a decrease? Is that always
it should just say decrease.
Okay, so the numbers are the case.
I'm sorry about that.
No, it's fine. I just wondered if it was the numbers that were wrong, as it were, or the.
No, so the numbers are correct, and I guess what we're trying to kind of show there is stability in the number of people, number of care leavers that we're providing support
that's
for.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. And then the other one was just if someone wouldn't mind expanding slightly on the young person's LGBTQ plus accommodation service and what the thinking behind that and how that works in the kind of specifically in the transition space, because presumably, as in how is that even identified, how we find, I'm just interested in that. So.
How is the service identified?
Well, more like how are the people, who gets in there, where, what is, how is that?
Yeah, Sure, it's actually a really good question because we kind of grappled with this over, so this is an existing service as well, and what we kind of grappled with was that often in the data, people that identify as LGBTQ+ might not necessarily say that when they come to the council. So what we kind of worked with is providers across London and kind of specialists in this sector to say, we'll take referrals directly from you because you know who you're working with. It is rough sleeping. People don't in that community or that cohort don't necessarily rough sleep in the same way as well. Sometimes they'll sleep on buses. Sometimes they'll engage in transactional sex. So it's more hidden. So what we wanted to do was ensure that this service was available for anybody, however they were presenting to our partners. So yeah, it's not necessarily you approach homelessness and then they make a placement. It's a little bit more dispersed than that.
Mr. Donovan.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the details in relation to the housing related support team and their work. Some private developers are building a number of co-living units. I mean, do you think those units may be useful for your work? I know they will probably be expensive, but in terms of independence, but also it's also supported living in terms of there's communal activities as well. It does seem to fit into what you need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we're always happy to have a conversation that kind of opens the door to possible solutions to the homelessness crisis. At the moment, we have a very high number of families in temporary accommodation, so we're kind of looking at how we can respond to that need. We also have single adults in TA, but we kind of have more provision locally that we're able to respond to that with. But yeah, absolutely. With the kind of co-living schemes that are appearing, I think one of our priorities would be around ensuring it's affordable. So we're obviously capped in terms of the local housing allowance rate and what housing benefit can cover, and also not placing people into kind of immediate financial crisis. Often people that are working have more limitations on what they can contribute to their rent. But yeah, absolutely.
Great, sounds like a good suggestion. Brilliant. I've got a question on slide 23, supported transitions. I wasn't quite sure what we were saying in these figures. So you've completed 2.6 times more lets. But what do you mean by 2.6 times more? 2.6 times, what sort of figures are we looking at?
Yeah, so this is around, it's less related directly to transitions, and this is more just allocations to the social housing register. So this would be what influences this number is, it could be new build properties coming online, and I think Jack's going to speak a little bit more about that in a moment. So as more properties come into the pool, we increase the number of lets that we do. There's other levers on this number as well, so it might be an improvement in voids. So if voids come online quicker, then we can obviously get through to letting those properties quicker as well. So it's really a kind of direct comparison of 23-24 to 24-25, and it's probably easier to kind of understand that in terms of a 162% increase. But appreciate the point around the clarity of the data in the pack.
Sorry, I still don't quite know. Are we talking, say, there's 100 more lets, or I don't know what these figures. Sorry, I don't quite understand what the. Yeah.
I think we might be able to come back with a base figure that it's 106. My maths isn't able to do that instantly. Have you got it, Sarah?
The figure was just because this is like the overall housing position, but of course it supports individuals on the register, of which a number of those are in the bands, which relates to transitions. So it is a wider point. So back from it was from a baseline of around 232 to over 700 lets in last year. So it was a significant increase in the number of social lets. Yeah.
That sounds a lot. And that's actually very helpful to have. That's brilliant. Thank you. Okay, and so on the bespoke housing delivery programme, are you going to be speaking to that part next? So is anyone wanting to sort of very quickly say anything on that, or should we just ask about the aims of the bespoke programme? So I've got Jack.
Just very quickly, and actually just as a general point, as a former parent carer for more than 30 years, if I could turn the clock back, I'd live in Haringey in 2025. Our lives would have been a great deal easier. The Bespoke Homes programme is aimed at achieving all of the things that you've heard from my colleagues this evening and doing it in bricks and mortar, because bricks and mortar safe, secure housing is the bedrock of any solution. We know that that engages children and young people, ensuring they remain in education, they remain safe from the type of harm we've heard described. I'm happy to take any questions on the slides.
Okay, well, this looks really exciting, so I'm just asking if there's any questions. Councillor Gross-Popoff.
So on page 25, you said there is 300 out of the 3,000 council homes that is going to be adaptable. And then on page 27, you're right, you say it says every 20 minutes a child is born who has grown up to have additional supported needs. So my question is, and normally when people go on the housing list, it's with their needs. So normally people with special needs or go higher up on the. So why is there only 300 being done and not a lot more?
The short answer to that is there are a great deal more, but 300 meet what is described as the rather boring M43 category, which is the larger category of designed homes to accommodate wheelchair users. My colleagues here will know the data better than me, but of those registered disabled and with additional needs in the United Kingdom, it's a relatively low percentage who are full-time wheelchair users. The world of housing construction hasn't caught up yet. It's still somewhere in the 1700s. So they do describe homes in a rather different way. Of the 3,000 homes to which we are currently committed as a council, approximately 2,200 will be fully accessible to anybody with either a mobility concern or a mental health issue that necessitates a degree of spatial awareness, and for those with visual impairments, with colour coordination that meets those needs. So it is a much higher number, but the way we have to describe our statistics for the GLA is, I'm afraid, a little antiquated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is really good news and very exciting. The whole idea of bespoke housing program. So presumably the idea is that they will be designed from the beginning for the needs of these young people or young people transitioning to adulthood, children, teenagers, and the houses will be fit for their needs. I mean, I always use the example of one of the council houses that was built in my ward, South Tottenham, and when 3 councillors, we visited this scheme, and we were well impressed because it's like, it was clearly a very good deal. Like it was to offer that to a family who really needs that. And also, you know, saving all those things that having to fit back. So it was built in like right from the beginning, including the kitchen, the shower and everything else. I mean, most social houses do have sort of wheelchair access type of thing, whether you are a user or not. That's not, but I mean, they could be allocated to general users as well. But yeah, I mean, please tell us more about what exactly we're trying to achieve here. Like, is it going to be a coordinated work between all the departments? Like, okay, we need this amount of houses, you know, for someone who's wheelchair user or someone who's got more complex disability, and they need to live in this kind of, okay. So I'm getting lots of nudges that it's.
I'll come in if I may. So obviously the wider bespoke housing programme really will be a collaborative effort and work between Jack's team, who are helping with the design and build phase, but also matching sort of exercises that will take place within Maddie's team, actually lettings and rehousing, linked directly to children's, adults and transitions. So actually it's that kind of collaborative piece and identifying and matching families against needs, properties and design. So it has to be a real sort of cross-council collaborative effort, and we're working actually on strengthening those arrangements as we speak, but it will be directly linked and there'll be a direct route from the transitions team into identifying where there will be that kind of lifelong need for individuals about building homes adapted around those needs, which will be future-proofed for the families, which is also a really important aspect of this.
Well, sorry, Councillor Haran, did you want to ask anything on this specific? Yep.
No, thank you, Jack. Very impressed with this program. Look, I do have one concern, though. We have, I don't know, 12,000 people on temporary housing, and I'm kind of trying to work out how we balance the needs of this 300 versus the needs of everyone in band A and B. How do you manage that juggling act, really?
Well, thankfully I don't. But yes, Maddie and her colleagues in the housing team spin those plates. But actually our task is to work closely with them to make sure that those cases that they identify as having the highest priority get the highest priority when it comes to designing and building. I'll give you the best example. A family was identified to us who have 4 children, 2 of whom present with some vulnerabilities and additional needs. They moved into a flat in Tottenham Hale, and we designed a flat that combined actually 2 2-bedroom flats into a single 4-bedroom flat. When we revisited 12 months later to see how everybody was getting on and make sure the building was fine, the mother of the household greeted us with open arms and said, "You've come at a very good day, because of what we've done and because of the work you've done and the supported family environment you've created, my daughter walked today for the first time." And that was a very moving moment for us, because there is no greater privilege in the work I do than handing over the keys to somebody's forever home, and to do that in a way that makes a meaningful, life-changing difference to the most vulnerable members of society is an even greater privilege. So we work very closely with Maddie and her colleagues to make sure that we can repeat that as many times as we possibly can.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that story. Thank you very much.
Okay, so Jack, based on my previous comments, you'll probably understand we're not going to spend a huge amount of time scrutinising this, because it sounds like it's doing incredibly well and a brilliant job for residents. And as I think colleagues have said, if we just could have more of those, I know the world we're living in. Amanda.
I have a question for you, Jack. That's really very encouraging to hear. Give you a different scenario. So I support a family who has 4 children. All 4 are SEND children. Family was living in temporary accommodation in Haringey, which actually was not conducive to their needs. It was a very small place. And the mum was actually trying to get one of those properties in Tottenham that you're speaking about, but her and her family got shipped out to another borough, even though all 4 SEND children are here in terms of schooling and services. So how do those families kind of get reached? How do they...
Yeah, sure. So in relation to out of borough placements. I'm not sure on the specific details of the case, but there are a couple of reasons why somebody would be offered a place out of borough. It might be in the first instance that it's a very temporary move, so it might be what we've got available on the day in terms of a B&B or a commercial hotel. And that's obviously the worst case scenario for a family, especially in the situation that you're describing. We really, really acknowledge that that is not a good outcome, and it's something we're working really hard to minimise and to be out of those hotels outside of the borough. But another scenario may be in that we've got private sector leased accommodation or a private rented sector accommodation. And every day, really, we're trying to balance the needs of the incoming families that are presenting as homeless, those that are in temporary accommodation but need to move urgently back to the borough. So we're kind of weighing up the needs of each family on a day-to-day basis to look at who should be prioritised for each accommodation that becomes available. Bespoke homes is slightly different. And the housing register obviously sits outside of that because it's very formulaic. You have a band that's evidence-based assessment of your kind of medical need and your family circumstances, and then you have a date that you go into that band. So that is slightly different. But obviously, yeah, we are in a position within the housing crisis, and like many other local authorities, where we're having to make placements out of borough and into not ideal circumstances. So we do acknowledge that.
Thank you, because it's what I find interesting is that this family in particular have the eldest child is about 13, going on 14, and for the entire life of the first child, never mind including the other three, this family has been in temporary accommodation. So I don't understand what the criteria would be or what they would have to. I get that maybe you didn't have, or at the time, there wasn't sufficient housing in the borough, but the needs, it's ending up costing more because the children now need to be bussed in when that wasn't, they could walk to school when they were here in Haringey. But that's now kind of not the case. And so the question I'm really asking is for families like that, which yes, it's an extreme case, but there are cases like this. How do those families kind of meet the criteria to kind of come back? Because we talk about savings on one hand, but then they've been moved out. Yes, they've got a larger property, but all 4 of those children need to be bussed back in to Haringey. So it kind of is counterproductive with the saving for what now needs to be. Do you understand where I'm going with this?
So there's a couple of things. So when we said that we were working on strengthening the work between Bespoke and all of those different teams, that is an area that we're looking at by way of development. And we also have within our lettings and allocation policy capacity for decisions to be made where there's an overriding interest for the council. So we've done actually a number of things in order to try and improve based on the current allocations policy and what we've got now. And I think through some of the subgroups that the parents, sort of SEND parent care forums have been involved in, we've spoken before around consultation on our housing allocations policy and how that will prioritise things in a different way, and particularly for children, and that will be out to consultation, and that will seek to prioritise those most in need to make sure that that then impacts people's position and place on the register ultimately. So there's a few things, some of which are more longer term. But in terms of that case, please do, we take casework outside of the room, please do flag that to us, and we can make sure that we triangulate your insight with our data to make sure that we are placing those, and particularly where you say actually from the impact to other budgets, and we see that with sort of within adult social care as well. We can absolutely take that into account, and we'll be putting in new sort of panel review processes so that we're making a really informed decision about managing those priorities alongside the needs and the plans that are in place around some of these homes.
Thank you. Can I bring that to you directly? Because whoever the predecessor was, it has been escalated to them. They've now left and nothing's happened. So do I come to you directly with that?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have a look and be able to give some feedback. And obviously we are balancing you know, the needs, and we'll come back specifically on that case to you.
Thanks, Amanda. But I think, as I said, on a wider point for the report next year, it's around understanding how that consultation process goes and that new procedure for looking at, you know, who gets the priority, but working with the groups that you've just mentioned, I think would be really helpful to have in the report, just to give that clarity around that. So thank you, because I can understand that bespoke homes would be an area where a lot of people would be really interested in understanding that. So we're going to move on to employment and transitions, because we do need to get to this part. So we've got that, so from page 34. So there's internships, Haringey Works, there's a snippet there. I think there's quite a lot of work actually underneath this. So I'm just asking if...
There's a colleague, Sharon Bolton, he's joining online from Haringey Works.
Perfect. So if I could bring you in at this point. Sorry, turning around to see you.
Sharon, are you online?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can now.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. It's been interesting just listening in the background here. So, I am Sharon Bolton. I'm delivery manager for Haringey Works, and Haringey Works is the council's employment support service. We're based at Wood Green Central Library on the second floor. The team is a general employment support service, and we provide support for any Haringey resident over the age of 18 looking for work. And so we would provide the range of employment support from CV writing to interview preparation, application support, and everything in between. We start where people are and then move on from there. So I had a meeting quite recently with Dennis Scotland and I think two other colleagues to talk about support for some of the young people that you're talking about this evening. And in truth and in fact, we rarely see the young people we're talking about. We really do see them. Normally, it's somebody that we have supported into work already, and they may have a child. They have a young adult looking for work, and then we would meet them in that way. But in the main, we just don't see them. And one of the slides, as a matter of fact, actually shows the number of young people that we have supported. Let me just see if I can find that very quickly. I'm conscious of the time. So last year, 24-25, we supported we registered 54 young people. We registered 54 young people, and 6 of those 16 to 18-year-olds went into work. In terms of 19 to 24s, we registered just over 200 young people, and 83 of those young people went into work, and 17 of those young people, I'm not too sure if you're seeing that slide, I think it's slide 40, according to the one that I have. 17 of those young people identified themselves as having a disability. We found that quite a few of the young people, after they registered with us and after we had sessions and careers advice and planning and training, etc., at least 30 of those 19 to 24s then went on to go into some form of full-time study, whether it be college or university. Of the 17 young people registering as having a disability, 9 of those young people actually went into full-time work and 2 went into part-time work. Those numbers are not huge. And we have an employment advisor who works specifically with young adults with learning disabilities and or autism, Nadia Alves. And some of you are familiar with her because I think she worked in Dennis's team before in the Preparing for Adulthood team when you had that service running. I think at just before 9 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, my first thought is I would love to be able to extend the services of the advisors that we have to support the young people that you're talking about this evening. But in essence, I think we need to have somebody in one of the teams in your service, someone who will work with our team. So we will identify the opportunities. We can create the links with employers. We can talk about inclusive recruitment. We can talk about job carving and creating opportunities for the young people. but your staff would know so much more about them than an average employment advisor would. So we have an advisor who works with young people going into construction. We've got one, a specialist advisor that works with young people who are interested in creative roles. We have a youth advisor, etc. But I think in order to provide the best support for these young people, we do need to have a specialist, somebody who has an understanding of young people facing the challenges and barriers that some of these young people face. And we must say, in spite of that, the ones that have made their way through to us, the ones that have identified that they have some form of a disability and they self-identify, they are very determined. And they are engaging and they're committed to the employment support process, but we just don't see enough of them. So I guess I've been asked to say, well, what could we do with the resources that we have, which is for the general population? What could we do? And there is a slide, if you can move on to the one after, in terms of the proposed Haringey Works offer. I'm not too sure if you can share that slide. I've got it on mine, but can you share that?
Yes, we can do that.
Right. And so we said, one of our specialist advisors would be willing to have a weekly presence in one of your offices. You need to let us know where that is going to be. We will run workshops. Of course, we need to know something about the young people we're working with to know how to run these workshops, to look at the content of the workshops and to tailor them to make sure they're fit for purpose. There's a lot going on in construction, health and social care, and in the creative industries that some of the young people might benefit from. And I'm making very generalized statements because I have no idea of the profile of the young people that we are talking about. And I'm sure we can get some support with that information. We do have a new program that's starting for young people with multiple barriers and those who are familiar with the criminal justice system. And that starts next week. We do have the Connect to Work program, which launches in July for people with health conditions or mental health conditions. You already know about the unpaid work placements in the local authority. And so that's the information you see outlined there is the general offer. This is what we propose to do, but we do need a steer from you. We do need to know exactly what it is that you need. We actually have a Greater London Authority initiative. We're just waiting for sign off from them. They've said it will happen. They've actually sent the money, but the paperwork has not been done, so we can't do anything at all about it yet. For 16 to 18 years, it's a neat program for 16 to 18-year-olds. And we are wondering whether or not there are young people in this cohort who will actually benefit from that. So there is some help, but I don't believe that it is tailored in the way that would perhaps meet the needs of the young people that we're talking about. So I'm going to need some intelligence from you and from your team and from some of the users of the service and some of the parents of the young adults we're talking about to help us to create something that's fit for purpose and not just for us to stay in Wood Green Library and come up with ideas about what we think would actually work. I think that's my contribution for the time being.
Sharon, thank you. That's actually incredibly helpful. So I'm going to go straight to, Dennis, would you like to sort of come in on this? Because I saw you nodding away as Sharon was speaking. So I think there's a proposal here on the table from Sharon.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And we're very grateful to Sharon for the offer. I mean, we have met with Sharon, myself, and a couple of the colleagues from the team, specifically to tease out what was available. And what we had in mind was the young people who we're doing our transition work with, who have indicated that they want to get into employment and they don't know the way to go. So then what we would do is we would link them with Sharon's service. The difference between Sharon's, no, I should say difference, but Sharon's service works with young people who do not have an EHCP, whereas, or they may do, but whereas the service above it, the provision that's earlier, which we won't go into now, they they work only with young people with in the HCP. So it's great that we've got both, because in some cases, some of the young people we're working with don't have plans, and others do. So this is a welcome opportunity, really, to link our young people who are transitioning and need help and advice and guidance and support around how to get into the employment space and to get the right kind of training and support. So yes, and we will form the link.
I was going to say, so it's a watch this space, and the report next year. Sharon, I think it would be great to have you back, but you and Dennis doing a slight double act on this bit at this point, and just finding out how this has progressed. So this looks really exciting, and I applaud your enthusiasm at this time of night. So thank you very much for bearing with us up to this point. It's much appreciated.
No problem,
If there's any
thank you.
quick questions, I've got Councillor Brennan, I've got Amanda, and I've got Councillor Grosspov. So if you could just ask your questions quite briefly. So we've got one last section to go, so thank you.
Bearing in mind what it sounds like we've got coming down the line in relation to lack of funding for young people who might have special needs and other things, are we setting in motion contingency plans to up our sort of facilities to help these people into work? I mean, what Haringey Works is doing is wonderful. It just sounds like we have to go into sort of accelerated mode to join up the dots. Are we planning for that?
I mean, that's not a question that I can particularly answer. And I think it goes without saying that if we really want to see these young people fulfill their potential, regardless of their barriers, then it makes sense that in spite of the budget constraints that we find a way of finding the funds to make sure that there's at least one role within this service that could work alongside Haringey Works.
Sharon, I don't think colleagues heard any of that from what I can see on the screen.
Oh. Can anybody hear me now?
Sorry, Sharon, apologies. I heard a very small amount of what you just said then. Do you want to just very briefly repeat that, because our mics were all down, sound was down.
Okay, sorry. I was actually saying that I'm not in a position to actually answer that specific question, but I would make the point that I understand, like every other officer around here, I do understand the budgetary constraints and the fact that there isn't spare cash. I really do understand that. But I do believe that if we really want to help these young people to meet their full potential, then it would really make a big difference, I think. And I think the returns would be amazing if we were able to find, even if it is a half post, that could work alongside my team to make sure that this particular cohort of young people get access to the right employment support and careers advice when it is needed. I think that's essential, and I think it's something that we should seriously consider.
I think that's been heard loud and clear, and I think the committee is really interested to see how that goes. I've got Jackie and I've got Councillor Desnev, so I don't know which order you both would like. Councillor Desnev wants to come in first, then Jackie, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think it's a really pertinent and helpful question. You are right, we are at an important moment, although actually it's always really important to think what more we can be doing to invest in young people, because we know the outcomes will be better if we invest now than later on in the journey, as we've seen in all our inboxes and on the casework. Just to reassure you that Councillor Gordon and I have had a couple of meetings, and we had one recently with officers just thinking about what that landscape looks like now. That conversation's ongoing. Yeah, we are very challenged financially, but we also, there are, sorry, strange noises coming from outside. Noises of joy, I hope. Yes, really excited about the work we might do. So that it's very pertinent because it speaks to all the things we're talking about here. It speaks to what we want to do in terms of improving our work in the light of CQC. It speaks to having better outcomes for young people who are young now and then in 20 years' time will be less young. So that conversation is ongoing. It's very much on our agenda, and we'll no doubt be picking it up again and again in order to think how we can use the resources we do have and how we can maximise maybe the opportunities as well that are arising maybe at a London level and at a national level around funding that can help us supercharge. So no direct answer, but watch this space.
Okay.
Thank you, Jackie. And then I've got Amanda and yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, colleagues. Jackie DeFalco, Director for Early Help Prevention and SEND. I just wanted to add to what Sharon was saying, in particular in relation to the SEND internship programme that we have, and just to give some assurances about some of the opportunities that we have. So we do currently have 45 young people aged between 16 to 24 who have an education healthcare plan who are on a SEND supported internship now. And 12 of those are from within the council. So every single directorate in the council has a SEND supported internship running. In terms of the offer going forward, we've done a lot of work with providers. So from September, we have 160 new placements, and they're a mixture of pre-SEND supported internships, because for many of our young people, they're not ready for the formal apprenticeship. So they'd like a course that's sort of prior to that level. And they're in a range of areas. So library assistants, office administration, hospital, sports and leisure, technology, horticultural, so a range of settings. And what we know from our evidence is that over 60% of our young people who have been on a SEND supported internship have moved on to paid employment. So it's a specific programme that is really reaping the benefits, and we're trying to expand and increase that going forward. And I'm happy to share the link to the brochure for the next academic year so that you can see the range of the offer.
Jackie, that sounds great. Thank you. And yes, I would appreciate the link. I didn't realise your numbers had gone up because on the other slide we've got, I think we're slightly out of date on those figures, aren't we? So that's really positive to hear that those numbers for those project internships are going up. Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jackie, for your update. Great to hear all of that. I'm just going to speak as a parent. I'm not going to speak as the chair of SEND Power. It's boring. This is something that we have been pushing for and needing for years. A lot of our children, if they've got a parent like me who just doesn't give up and doesn't matter what goes on, we all think, when we close our eyes for the last time, are our children going to be sufficiently okay in terms of employment? Fine. 7 years ago, I lobbied the then head of SEND service to ask, why are you promoting supported internships and apprenticeships and getting into work and all of this stuff when you don't have the courses for what our young people want to do? In-house, in Haringey, at the time, I had to say, look, it's going to be educating our children is going to cost you a lot more, because they're going to have to go out of borough for the courses that they would like to do. And generally, if we're talking about autistic youngsters specifically, I can speak to that cohort. I am an autistic person. We are sensory creatures, so something like horticulture is going to be good. For somebody like my daughter, who is a wordsmith and she's very academic, being in an office suited her. That was never going to suit my son. So I lobbied the then head of SEND service to say, look, Haringey Sixth Form have got the capacity to have a catering course because of the setup of the college, and things were not being utilised. I even told her how she could generate the money. So said, so done. And then this wonderful course, which is hospitality and catering, NVQ up to from level 1 to 3 was born, and the course was adapted so that it was accessible to the 13 young people with SEND that began the course. And they, at the end of it, they still got an accreditation, and they still were able to, which is how my son is now working at the National Theatre. So if you don't have the courses that they are interested in primarily, how do you expect to get hold of, how do you expect to hold them? We all know when we were younger and you were 16 and someone said, what do you want to do for a job? Unless you had, you know, like my daughter knew she wanted to be a literary agent. Thank God she's a literary agent. That was her thing. But for us, did everybody know what they wanted to do when they were 18? Don't think so. So how do we expect our SEND young people to have that knowledge and that information? If, as Sharon says, I totally agree with you, Sharon, if you don't understand the needs of the service user, how are you going to communicate to find out what they need and how they're going to progress? I was fortunate that Action for Kids, otherwise known as AFK, went to Haringey Sixth Form and targeted those young people. So what they were able to get was help writing a CV. They were, because AFK is connected to a lot of the organisations and companies in Haringey, they were able to offer them mock interviews. And then they went off to Sainsbury's, to Nando's, the National Theatre, and quite a few other businesses within Haringey. And some of those young people were then placed. And so, again, I say, the resources are there. If we think out of the box about how we're going to reach our young people, it really isn't rocket science. So I'm really glad when I hear Jackie say, you know, we've gone from this much to now this much. All of that is great. However, the cohorts keep coming. The cohorts keep coming. We've got God knows how many cohorts that are never going to benefit from being able to go to work because they missed the boat, because there wasn't a smooth transition, there wasn't a preparation for adulthood that was sustainable, that stayed and continued to function. So my question is, of all of the organisations that we have in our borough, all of the organisations from the NCL that support, I'm coming from a time when the 5 boroughs used their services, and each of us could dip in and out of the 5 boroughs. So of the services, specifically grassroots services for our young people to be able to thrive and learn. But we seem to be kind of going backwards. I can't help it. I'm closer to 60 than I look, but my eldest is almost 30. My youngest is just turned 24, and we seem to be still having the same kind of conversation about how we're going to reach them. What about the cohort in between my 28 and my 24-year-old? They're lost. These are families whose young people, if they can get them out of the bedroom, much less out of the house, they're lucky, you know, to go into the garden of their own home. And these youngsters are smart. They've got the capacity, but if you don't get them, say from age 14 or 15, what about the ones that that have a diagnosis but not necessarily an EHC? How are we targeting those young people? How are we speaking to them in a language that they understand, that they would say, you know what, I'd like to sweep the street. I would like to wash windows. It's not all digital for them. And so I think my question is, how do we reach those young people? How are we prepared to reach and think out of the box so that those young people will gravitate and will come into the job centre, will speak to whoever they need to speak to in order to find employment? Do you know what I mean? I wish all parents were like me, because we would then be able to advocate for all of our children, but some of us are not. But they still need a voice, and they still need to be heard and helped out and supported.
Thank you, Amanda. No, that's really helpful, actually. So, Jackie, you said about the courses expanding exponentially. So could I just ask you if you've got sort of a comment on that? Are we saying that we've actually got far greater number of courses and different things for young people now to be interested in and be supported on? And then Dennis, just very quickly to come back on the cohort that haven't got the EHCP, or Dennis or Jackie, sorry, I don't know who, and maybe just Jackie, is around, well, what else can we do? Because I know you're talking to, or you said you're speaking to Sharon, so I just wondered if that was an area to pick up. And then I've got Sarah and Councillor Desneves, and then Councillor, I'll come to your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, Amanda will know. Amanda and I work very closely together, so she knows that I will say this in relation to the SEND supported internship programme. I think we've made significant progress in terms of particularly a programme for children with EHCPs aged 16 to 24. But I think the baseline that we started from was very low, so I think we had a lot of work to do. But where we are now, to have 45 young people and to have 160 new placements, a mixture of pre-internship and supported internships, is significantly greater from where we have been. And they are in a range of areas that young people have an interest in, and they're work-based learning opportunities, so they're aligned with, attached to a course. And the reason that we've got a much better varied offer now, and that has come from direct consultation with young people about what they want to see. So making use of our SEND Youth Forum Elevated Youth in particular, but also we have a dedicated SEND supported internship coordinator who works closely with Dennis's team and with Sharon in terms of making sure the connections are there. So we've got an offer for all young people and older. So there will always be work to do. We have a dedicated section within our local offer website, and we will continue to look at how we can expand that going forward. And welcome, Amanda, you and I can catch up for any other ideas that you've got on this and how we can do better. Thank you.
I just wanted to come in on a couple of, I suppose, areas of opportunity and collaboration. We have, through the borough partnership and arrangements with health, there is an employment and health partnership forum that also includes voluntary and community sector participation as part of that. And I do think that looking at also the employment and volunteering opportunities through the voluntary and community sector is an area where we could do more. Sharon briefly touched on the Connect to Work programme. I think we'll be making a decision. We'll be going through Cabinet in the not too distant future, and the ambitions of that are around those kind of structural barriers around employment for residents with disabilities, complex needs and health conditions specifically, and about creating like a unified approach between the employment offer, the health offer and the community support offer. And I think there is an opportunity within that for us to be a bit more strategic in our approach about how we align that opportunity to our transitions work. And I think that's something that we need to explore. It is grant funded as well, just to pick up on some of the pressures. There are also work programmes that happen across North Central London, and obviously activity for people and work isn't just within Haringey, so that collaboration across North Central London with there's a Work Well programme that North Central London ICB is part of, a sort of trailblazer and pilot. And again, how are we making sure we link those strategic opportunities for us, as well as looking at what is commissioned by health locally as well, particularly for individuals with mental health. There are some excellent IPS, so individual placement support programs that are health-led. And again, we need to be collaborative in our approach and making sure we're maximising all of those opportunities for our transitions cohort. So that is an area, I think, for further development through our partnership plans and engaging with parent carers and young people. So I think for me, that's a real area, I think, where there's opportunity for evolution as part of this programme.
All right, I look forward to that in next year's report. So thank you. I think you've just talked yourself into that whole extra part there, but no, that's really helpful actually, and that is really useful to know what's coming up and what we can tap into to support people, not only in Haringey but across, as you said, the 5 boroughs in particular. Not everyone's working in Haringey. Right, Councillor Grosskopf, did you want to come in? Okay, Councillor Desneves, I am conscious of time, so I'm just going to ask people to keep it slightly more brief if we possibly can.
Just to say two things. One, Amanda heard, seen and understood, especially in the light of the recent conversations. And the second thing I wanted to say is that everything that you've said is reflected in a few conversations I've had recently, including with a really organisation that's really local to here that I didn't know about called Atypify, which you probably know about, and we talked exactly about some of the things you talked about. So I think there's some really good foundations with your, what you're expressing and organisations like Atypify to pick this conversation up, especially because of the national context and the sort of moment of possible converting a moment that can be difficult into a moment of opportunity. So more to pick up.
Just to add to that, what's really interesting is that during COVID and just after COVID, the National Theatre, or CURB, which is the food arm of the, they realised that they were really not kind of accessing the full workforce, and I have it on good authority from the CEO of CURB that he reached out, he said, to all 32 boroughs, and reaching out with, look, we've got this thing and we're actually wanting to target youngsters with additional needs and specifically SEND, because we realise that we're kind of missing a trick in the workforce. And apart from my son, there's another young man from Bounds Green who became the poster boy for CURB. And apart from those two young men, only Southwark answered the call. So again, there's something to, if they don't know who to target, who knows where the email went, and what department and who to. So again, we kind of miss a trick, and then you ask, and then my son is asked to come and speak to people at Haringey Sixth Form who are doing the course that he's doing. How do we get to the pathway where you are? But there's a disconnect, so we should have a conversation.
Well, this is what Scrutiny is so good at. So because it's an adults and children's the transition, this is the Scrutiny forum for this. And I think us being able to sort of look, you're sort of posing that, rightly so. I think we're getting some great answers, but I think it's actually how it works in practice and what it, if it does what it says on the tin. So I think next year, I think we'll be hopeful that we'll get a really good answers back for you on that, and I think everyone in the room is also nodding along here, so I think you're pushing at an open door definitely on this point here. Councillor.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be cheeky and ask two questions. One is for Sharon. On the slide which you speak about the numbers, you got about, it says age 16 to 80, 54 registered and 6 in employment, and then 90 to 24 is 200 registered and 83 in employment. My question is, which I'm trying to understand the numbers, the people who are not employed, what's happened to them? Is it because there's no employment? Is it because they weren't interested? And then the difference between the two age cohorts, between 16 and 18 and 19 to 24, there's by disability is 0, and then it goes up to 17. So where are the SEND in the 16 and 18? The other question is towards the council. We're putting all these courses on, and what happens after the courses for employment? Is there any support that you give companies to be able to take these SEND people, SEND children, adults into work, and the companies are able to work with them? Thank you very much.
May I just respond to the question in relation to the figures, if I can do that very quickly?
Yes, please do.
Very conscious of time. So in the 16 to 18, none of the young people that registered with us declared that they had a disability. It's a voluntary question. No proof is required, but none of the young people that we had at that time registered as such. These figures are for the 2004 to 2005 year, so up to March. It is highly possible if someone registered with us in February, they may have had a job since in April or May or even June 2025, but this relates to the last year. So 208 in total registered with us, and of that, up to the 31st of March, 83 of them had actually gone into work. And by going into work, we're referring to not jobs paying anything below London living wage, and London living wage is now £13.85. So the numbers do look small, but we also supported quite a few of the young people that came through to us who, after a career talk, a career conversation, did not know what they wanted to do. Some of them decided to go back into full-time education because that was the right thing for them. So for me, I know the numbers don't tell the full story, but maybe I should have told you how many of these. I think there were at least 38 young people of this group that actually went into full-time study after registering for employment support. And for those young people, it was right for them. And of the 208 that registered, only 17 declared that they had some form of a disability. I'm hoping that answers your question.
It wasn't a question, it was just I was trying to understand, is there something wrong on our side that there isn't the employment for them? And that's what I was trying to understand. So thanks very much for that.
Okay. The one other thing I would say, I know Sarah mentioned it earlier about Connect to Work, which launches in our team next month. Connect to Work is one opportunity, so far the best opportunity to support that we've had, that is not short-term funded. Connect to Work is a 5-year program, and it will specifically deal with adults, and in this case, young adults who have any form of a need. And part of the uniqueness of Connect to Work is that we will approach organizations on behalf of the young person to talk about inclusive recruitment and to see whether or not the roles can be adapted towards the person's particular need. And my contact details are in the chat, and if anybody wants to pick that up outside of this so that we can continue that conversation, that would be absolutely wonderful on my part.
Okay, thank you. I think you've answered that very fully. So yes, I'm not seeing anyone's hands. Is it Sarah who's coming in? Yeah.
That we're putting on all these courses, then what happens afterwards? Are we working with the companies and organisations to make sure that people get jobs?
I suppose Sharon is a bit in
that was Sharon's answer. So part of the Connect to Work programme is actually working with our local economy and businesses within it to work with them to adapt roles that may be more suitable and that inclusive recruitment programme. And Sharon's point is that team, and I'm speaking on behalf of one of my other colleagues in a completely different area, but hopefully I get this right, Sharon, but historically that hasn't been the focus of the service. Through this programme it will be, and there's long-term funding to support the ongoing development of those relationships with local businesses. There is also work that happens that we call for our anchor institutions, and particularly, our own local authority, but also health partners in this space. And yeah, I think that will be further developed and strengthened through the Connect to Work programme specifically.
All right.
I'm going to have to move us on because we've still got one last section, which is the part around transition service phase 2. So I see on that the multidisciplinary team, people that you're looking to employ for, areas that you have got need for. You've got the savings and KPIs on page 40. You've got next steps on transitions, and then more next steps on transitions. So I'm just going to take a couple of quick questions on these slides. Councillor Donovan, you had your hand up for the last one, so I'm going to give you the first opportunity to ask a question if you wanted to on these last couple of slides. So Councillor Donovan, and then if another couple of people like to put their hands up, and then we'll need to probably come to an end because I think we've held everyone here for a long time tonight, and we are hugely grateful that you have stayed in the room with us. So, but Councillor Donovan.
Okay, well, my first question is about, and it links back to what we were talking about, children and young people and their parents who may not necessarily be accessing the services, but obviously still going through a transition, and they may be dealing with that transition in a do-it-yourself way in finding out all the relevant information. And it relates to the website. Looking at the website, there does seem to be a lot of information. It does seem to be set out in a very clear way, but maybe I could ask Amanda and others whether it is as clear and as accessible as it looks. There's the page about the local offer, then it's broken down into a younger person's Ascend Youth Space, which is a hub for younger people 14 to 25, which gives a lot of information. There's another part of the website for parents, and there's another part for professionals, and it has links to a lot of other organisations and other training, including Haringey Works, etc. So my question is, does it work, and can we improve it? That's my first question. Okay.
Sorry, I just think it's probably better if you're spaced together. Just
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, my other question is about links with the voluntary sector, and throughout this document it talks about working with the voluntary sector, and that's certainly a way within NHS London are talking about their neighbourhood schemes, which links into our localities, of having strong links with voluntary sectors, organisations, and here it talks about, again, and there's one particular organisation which seems to mirror a lot of the things that we're talking about today in helping children from 7 right up to younger adults aged 24, and that's Haringey Shed. And what they do that mirrors our work is that they don't say at 16 you have to leave, or 18 you have to leave. They tailor the support that they offer. Obviously they deal with music and theatre and writing and dance, and I suppose a lot of my colleagues are thinking about Haringey Shed this week, because we saw a brilliant performance at the Vernigrad Arts Centre where something like 100 kids from all sorts of ages put on a brilliant performance, and they're just an example of those children. They're not just living with disability and neurodivergence, but they're thriving, and they're celebrating their abilities. And they're also an organisation that is preparing young people for adulthood. So I suppose my question is, firstly, I think we all value the work of Haringey Shed, who are based over in the Irish Centre in Tottenham, but how can they be linked into some of the work that we're doing in transitions, because their work does, as I said before, does really reflect some of the ambitions that we were talking about today. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I was just going to take the last one first. So I think absolutely right, Councillor, about the value of the voluntary and community sector, and I think I'm a relative newcomer to the borough, but I can already see the richness of what's out there. I think Amanda reflected that earlier as well. I think that it would be brilliant to get that energy that you do get when you bring people together, when they realise that they each have a critical role to play. And I think there are still many people, many residents that we work with that do not want to engage with statutory services, but want to engage with someone, and are maybe quite isolated, lonely. There's a whole load of different people in the borough that require different kinds of services, and I think certainly in social care, one of our priorities going forward is to have a lead commissioner for transitions. We've spoken about this before, haven't we, Sarah, that we need somebody that's got that lens on finding out exactly what is out there in the local offer, because whilst the local offer is brilliant, and I think a really critical a tool, not everyone uses IT either. So I think getting out to the organisations that represent people that may be furthest away from decision making or lack trust, I think is really important going forward. And I think on the last slide it does mention the transition task force that we've begun to talk about as a transitions group, how we could come together and link in and do more work to reach those organisations that would be able to support different types of people in different places at their point of transition.
So he's answering Councillor Donovan's first question. Websites, and that is it.
I can answer that, Chair.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Jackie.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, really helpful. I mean, just to give you some assurance, we do have a local offer steering group, which is made up of representation of young people's parents and carers and partners. And they so regularly review the local offer, the quality of the information, the accessibility of it, taken on board Joe's point around how we can make sure it is more accessible, particularly for those that don't have digital access. But the work stream that we talked about earlier, so the Friends, Relations and Community one, that work stream actually worked with young people to design the directory that's on there and the Send youth offer page that's on there. So we do review it on a regular basis, and we have very positive feedback, but there is always going to be more to do. And so we can take away certainly some feedback about how else you think that can be improved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to finish quite quickly now. So if Amanda, have you got a very short, small question? Okay, that's okay. Thanks.
It's more of a statement than a question.
Right. Okay.
In answer to your question, we at Send Power and the parents worked really hard with the local authority to literally change the shape of the local offer, change the culture of the local offer, change the look of the local offer, so it looks like what it is now. And to be fair, yes, there are the digital poverty and all of that. Nothing beats word of mouth. No. Absolutely nothing beats word of mouth. So we are in a position where we can say, like I'd say to Jackie, oh, this, this link doesn't work, or